Tonight, we are rocking the Kasbah with a fundraiser, a special fundraiser for our festival in February in Marrakesh, an actual physical festival where there will be between 40 and 50 storytellers from all over the world. It'll be an amazing, most amazing party. You're all welcome. Pop along, come along, book onto the riads, look on the site, see which riads are housing, because it's the whole of the whole of Medina will be a phenomenal festival. Ali's in charge, of course, of the whole thing. I'm just joke, Ali. Don't get nervous there. And, but for now, I'm going to pass this fundraiser over to Gary accordingly. But before I do, there's always a before I do. If anyone's just watching on Facebook, they can donate by going to paypal.me, little dashy thing, FestiFund 2022. Of course, if you're watching on the worldstorytellingcafe.com, you can just click on the little hat and pop something in there. And with that, now you know how to give money, which is really important. Lots and lots of it, because we are running this festival on smoke and mirrors, and money's just helps a little. I'm going to pass over to the amazing Gary Cordingley. Gary Cordingley, take it away.
Thank you very much, John, for that wonderful, wonderful introduction, and welcome everybody to part two of Rock the Kasbah, a fundraiser where we are working together to bring as much money as we can into the big pot so that the festival will happen in February next year, the one that John just told you about. And something that John didn't tell you about is the fact that well, one of our members, Norman, who lives in Canada and who's Norman Perrin, I was just remembering his surname, is actually going to be raffling 3 books, one of which was written and signed by none other than, and I've forgotten his name. How terrible of me to, in this instant, have one of those moments where it's completely gone. So we'll come back to that in a short while, and you will understand that if you Duncan Williams, there you are. I told you that his name would come back, and it's signed by Duncan Williams, written by him and signed by him. And anybody who donates during the time
Williamson.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, William's son. That's what I meant. That's exactly what I meant. Thank you. So if you donate during, to this festival, then your name will automatically go into a hat. And at the very last evening, the very last Rock the Kasbah, we will do a draw, and the first one out of the hat will win the book by Duncan Williams' son. And then there are 2 other books to go with it. So that is something really exciting for people to look forward to, and maybe an incentive to put some money into the hat and donate. Now I'm rambling off the top of my head, mainly because the idea of these evenings, the way that they run, is that we would have a featured storyteller who would come and tell stories for approximately 20 minutes to half an hour, and then after that we'd meet the owners of one of the riads, and then we'd have stories from the other storytellers. And I got a message from this evening's featured storyteller about 2 minutes before we went live saying, "I've lost my Wi-Fi. I'll be back as soon as I can." And he hasn't yet returned. So therefore, I'm talking off my head, which is nothing unusual for me. At the top of my head, of course. We have some great storytellers lined up for you this evening. Some wonderful regular storytellers at the World Storytelling Cafe. And so at least I can see in front of me 8 or 9 tellers, and that's going to be really exciting. And I wrote the names down in a list in order of who said me first. And so maybe we could just begin with a story from one of the other tellers in the room. And then when our featured storyteller, Dave, gets back online, we can have a listen to him. So the first name on the list that I have is Baba C. Are you ready to tell us a story, Baba?
Am I ready? They named a battery after me. I don't know. The Ever Ready battery? Not talking about that bunny guy. But anyhow, yes, I do have a story. And let me see if I have the lungs for this. Bear with me, because when I first heard of the story, it was a long time ago. Yeah. So this is a story about the king's ring. And it's interactive. So when I go, the king's ring, everyone can unmute and go, not the king's ring. Okay. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's synced or not. It's the response that's important. So don't say it for the first time. So this story is about the king's ring. In fact, I'll hold up my hand when I want you guys to go, not the king's ring. Okay. So there used to be a king who was so rich. He was so rich. How rich was he? He was so rich. Everybody go, how rich was he? He was so rich.
How rich
was he?
Thank you. I forgot to tell you to unmute. He was so rich, his servants had servants. But he had such a great treasury, and he would travel throughout his kingdom, and he would look around and find things that he liked to buy, and he would buy them. A lot of times people tried to give them to him free, but he came upon one merchant that had a ring that was so beautiful. It was so wonderful that to look at it would mesmerize you. And you could almost see the images carved on the ring moving. And it was encrusted with rubies and diamonds and all sorts of wonderful material. And the king just had to have it. But this merchant wasn't going to give it away. So the king started negotiating, but the merchant stood fast by his price. And this king spent half of his wealth on that one ring. Now, of course, he didn't tell his queen what he had done, but he had this one ring, just one ring. Excuse me, that's from an old rap. And he would wear the ring, and the ring was so valuable, he would not tell anyone where he hid it when he wasn't wearing it. And he had it every day he would do. If he was going to take a nap, he hid it. If he was going to sleep at night, he hid it. And he would wear this ring every day, showing it off, mesmerizing the people. And soon the rumor spread that whoever wore this ring would rule the kingdom. One day the king got up and he went to get his ring, and it was missing. The king's ring.
Not the king's ring.
Was missing. So he called his most faithful servant. He said, no, someone has stolen my ring. And the servant went, someone has done what? Someone has stolen the ring. And the servant went, the king's ring?
Not the king's ring.
Yes, they've stolen it. And you know the rumor. Yes, I know the rumor. It said that whoever wears the ring will become ruler of the kingdom. He says, yes, we must find this ring, but how do we find it without telling people that it's been stolen? And so the servant thought, and he thought, and he thought, and inside his head, he was rambling, and he thought, and then he said, Almighty Oba, Almighty King, I have an idea. And he whispered to him. That's how you whisper online. And the king says, a brilliant idea. So they called everybody to the village center. And he said, someone has stolen something from the king. What it is of no importance. What is important is they have stolen from the king. And we will find this miscreant. And while the servant was talking, the other servants of the king were passing out sticks. They were passing out sticks. They were passing out sticks, much like this, but without this. And they were passing out sticks. And everyone, man, woman, and child, had a stick. And all the sticks were exactly the same height. And the king's servant said, tomorrow when we reconvene, the one who was stolen from the king, his staff will grow by 3 feet, and we will know who the thief is. Now, everyone, go about your daily chores, go about your daily business. And the thief, realizing he had the ring, but he knew he couldn't reveal that he had the ring because he was a thief. And the one thing in that society they could not stand was a thief. And so he's trying to figure out how not to be discovered. And then he remembered the staff he had. Tomorrow it would grow by 3 feet. So he said, aha, I know what to do. And so he went into his home and he took a saw and he measured down 3 feet on his staff and he started sawing. Zuba, zuba, zuba. And everybody knows that's not the sound of a saw, but hey, I'm a city kid. Zuba, 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 until he had cut off 3 feet of his staff. Now his staff was now 3 feet shorter than everyone else's, but he wasn't worried because tomorrow his magical staff would grow by 3 feet and no one would know he was a thief. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm back. The next day, everyone convened. The Oba sat on his Ashanti stool, and the servant said, everyone, prepare. Hold your staff so we can discover the thief. And everyone held their staff proudly. And everyone's staff was standing about yay high, except for the thief who had fallen for the ruse. And his staff was now shorter than everybody else's. And they all looked at the staff. They looked at the thief. They looked at the king and his servants and realized what had been done. And they went, thief! Now, in this society, being a thief meant you lost something very important. You lost all respect, you lost all of your privileges, and you lost your name. And without a name, you are what? Nobody. Now, you would think, surely they would whip him or flog him. No, what they did is they put him in a hut without any sides except for the 4 poles that held up the roof. And he was commanded to sit there and ponder on the errors of his ways. And every day people would pass by and they would see the thief and they would point to their children and say, this is what happens if you steal. And allegedly, no one ever stole anything ever after that. And the people remained very honest. And the moral of the story is, sometimes justice doesn't catch up with you. Sometimes justice comes down to you. Don't be a thief. Asante.
Great story.
Thank you.
Great story. Thank you, Baba. See, that was wonderful, wonderful. And a very important lesson. Don't be a thief and don't fall for those kinds of tricks, you know. Okay, can everybody just make sure that they're muted so that we don't have any bouncing around to different people. So great. Baba C, thank you. Great round of applause for this wonderful story. Part of my mind is trying to sort out where our featured storyteller is for this evening. Still Wi-Fi locked out, I believe. So, and Maria, I think you were in contact with, no, other Maria, sorry. Maria Credelli, I think, was talking to him. My list went Baba C and then went Bob. And Bob, where are you? New Mexico. Bob, New Mexico was going to come up with a story for us next.
Oh, okay, thanks.
I look forward to hearing this one, Bob. Thank you very much.
Well, hi, everybody. Well, somehow I'm not sure if this was the way things are going to pan out or not, but I was under the impression that there was a theme for tonight about traveling. So that may or may not be true. When I thought what I might share about travels and also the upcoming festival and the incredible situation that the people in the riads are going to be opening their homes to the tellers, the word hospitality jumped into my mind, and I began to think about my own experiences as a traveler and experiences with hospitality. So I just going to weave together just a few short experiences that came to mind, but really as a thank you to the riads who are extending themselves to us. This is, in 2 days, it will be exactly 50 years since I set out on a great adventure, a 2,000-mile kayak trip down the Yukon River. And this is where I began to learn lessons about bush hospitality for strangers. But to put it into some context, I have to go back 2 years previously. And can you picture me and 4 other young men in their early 20s with human skulls in one hand and a toothbrush in the other hand? We were working on an archaeological dig in Bay City, Michigan. And unfortunately, no one at that time ever said a word to us about the appropriate way to handle human remains. And so there we were in full public view on the porch of the house that we were renting, cleaning and cataloging human remains. Now, I didn't find out until many, many years later, but the local Chippewa tribe put a curse on the members of the dig. We were going to see the white ball of light in the forest and wander aimlessly for years and years. So now, 2 years later, or not quite 2 years later, a year later, I basically had a psychotic breakdown. I went crazy. Now, it may have been prescription drug induced, but it was, I was out of my mind. And the cure for me turned out to be travel. The cure was travel. And I thought I was going to go to Japan. I tried 5 different ports to try and get on a steamer that would go to Kyoto. I wanted to study Japanese gardens. Hit a dead end until I reached Seattle, Washington. And there I found out it wasn't going to happen. I went to a logging camp in the middle of the winter to see if I was going to be able to get a job as a logger. That sounded like something promising. And there it was that I met Crazy Eddie, the self-professed graduate of every mental institution in the 13 Western states. And when he found out that there was no work, he said, "I'm going to Alaska." I asked him, "When are you going?" He said, "Right effing now." And we were on our way. I had a backpack on my back. So this was the beginning of that aimless wandering. Hospitality. I arrived in Alaska in February in the middle of the winter with $5 in my pocket. That's how aimless and mindless this wandering was. My first day in town, I ordered a 50-cent cup of coffee because I thought that was all that I could afford. The waitress took notice of the new kid in town. She asked if I was looking for work. I said, absolutely. The next minute, there was a plate of ham and eggs in front of me. She asked if I had a place to stay. I told her I was going to pitch a tent. Can you imagine that? The next thing you know, she was on the telephone. Go up and see my friend Kathy. She runs a rooming house. I was given a room on credit. Do you have a job? Another phone call. 5 minutes later, I had a job that first week washing dishes, and I was on my way. Hospitality to a stranger the very first day of my trip to Alaska. A week later, I was on a boat that was taking logs that had escaped from log rafts and salvaging these logs. Unfortunately, in that situation, one of my crewmates, and I'm just telling you this because this is the way the world is. There's kindness in the world and there's craziness in the world. One of my crewmates was a guy who was bragging about having just come from the Amazon, where he was being paid bounties to kill natives who were interfering with oil exploration. The skipper of the ship was a virulent anti-Semite, and I couldn't take it. I got off that ship in the middle of the winter. I found an abandoned cabin, not a cabin, a warehouse. There had been a mortuary there. I spent that night in a padded coffin. And the next morning, I spent another 50 cents for a cup of coffee and met somebody who invited me out to a native village. He said, maybe somebody there The fishing is going to start soon. Maybe you can get a job. And back to the theme of hospitality, I went out to the small village. There were only two non-natives in the entire village. And for a month, one of the families put me up, treated me to dinner every night with their family, put me up on their boat until the fishing season started. And I went through a short fishing season with that family. Hospitality. The next year, I planned this trip down the Yukon River. And I just want to say that I stopped in every single village and almost every fish camp along the way. And there wasn't a single place, I can't think of one, among dozens and dozens of places that I didn't leave with fresh salmon, smoked salmon, where I wasn't invited into people's homes for a meal. Sometimes people invited me into their home and said, hey, here are the moose steaks, here are the bear steaks, there's the stove, cook them. All up and down the river, there was that hospitality. The salmon plays a really interesting role because later that year, I was home back in New York, where the ritual of my family, the greeting of my family, whether it's when I return home in all these years or whether it's people who come to visit, was smoked salmon. Very similar to the smoked salmon that I was given in the villages. And strangely, there was one time on the river that previous summer where we showed up. Well, we met somebody on the river at sometime in the afternoon, and he said, when you get to our village, I don't care what time it is, you stop, we're going to feed you. It was midnight. We were treated to a full course meal. Now, when I was back later that winter, back home, my mother asked me if I wanted to meet a woman who she thought I would be interested in. Well, that was sort of a red flag for me. But it was the mother of a student in someone else's class. She turned out to be the daughter of the man and woman, the husband and wife, 5,000 miles away on the Yukon River. It was the youngest daughter who had turned her back on native life, and she was a suburban housewife in New York. So I think, Gary, did you say something about, or John, about smoke and mirrors? I think there's about 100 people in the world, and the rest is done with strings and mirrors. But this is how hospitality in the small world come together. And I think I'll just finish by saying that there's a tradition in Alaska and the Yukon Territory. It's called Yukon Hospitality. And the idea is that you might be out in the middle of the winter, caught in a storm, and you need a place to get out of the cold, to save your life, and to build a fire really quickly. To build a fire just like that with one match. There are trap lines, at least there were back in 1971 when I made this trip. There were trap lines. I went past a house that said, you want sleep, this cabin, please don't take anything. There was a fire ready to be kindled with one match. It was the summer then. That's when I learned about Yukon hospitality. What you do, if you're caught out in that storm and there's nobody home, you invite yourself in, you light that fire, and you warm yourself and you make it through the night, but before you leave the next day, you make sure that you have cut wood, cut kindling, got the tinder ready, put the matches nearby so that the next traveler can light a fire and save their life. And I like to think, and I'll just leave it with this again, I'm telling you this personal tales about hospitality, but in the larger sense, again, as a thank you to the Riyadhs and the thank you to all the people who have given hospitality to travelers and strangers. I think that storytelling is like that a bit as well, because we are kindling the warmth of the human heart and spirit through the stories that we hear. And if we have been kindled and warmed that way, then we have to prepare the fire for the next one. And with that, thank you, everybody. And again, thank you to all the proprietors of the Riyadhs who are going to open their homes to us. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. That was a great story. Yeah, it's great. And it just makes me think of, like it's the same the world around, isn't it? Most people in the world are kind and generous, you know, but wherever you go, there's going to be bad ones, of course. But
Right.
but it's that kind of like that generosity and that sense of, well, we're all you know, we're all human, and we all, you know, need to help each other get through this. And it makes me think of well, Rory McLeod is a musician, and he's traveled all over the world, and he writes wonderful songs which are also stories, and he talks about, you know, how he was looked after in South America. And then when he was back home, he met a South American in England, and he was thinking of, oh no, when he was there, he was thinking he met a woman whose son was traveling in Britain, and he was saying, well, I'm hoping that he's getting the same reception in Britain that I'm receiving here, and just being looked after. And we need to look after each other. And it also made me think of the bothies. I don't know if you've heard of the bothies, but in Scotland and Ireland, and especially the Celtic countries, there are, you know, these houses out in the wild, so that if you're traveling and you're stranded, or you're way off your path or lost or whatever, you come across this place, same sort of thing. You just stay the night, and there's a fire in the hearth, and when you leave it ready for the next person. So it's the same the world over.
Gary, I didn't know about that. Thanks. Could you write that in the chat or something so I can just see what the word is?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I will do at some point. Bothy is BOTHY.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thanks.
Okay, Bothy culture as well. No, that's the name of an album. Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that, Bob. There's still no sign of Dave. And you reminded me as well, Bob, at the beginning there, yes, there is a theme for this evening's stories. If possible, people can tell those stories around the theme of travel. That's great, but it's not written in stone. So there's nothing that says it has to be, but that was kind of like what I was hoping. If anybody is in the space who is wanting to tell a story but hasn't already said, I would like to tell a story, if you just drop me a message directly in the message box, then I'll know, and I'll put your name on the list. We're going to have one more story, and that will be from Dave from the USA. In fact, whilst we're here, Abdu, have we got the Riyadh, tonight's Riyadh? Are they here? Are they?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, how are you doing?
Personally, I'm doing great, and I can see lots of things up. Yeah.
Yeah, very good, very good. Thank you for that story. It was really lovely. So yes, for tonight we have another place, which is one of our friends, and he's not far from Riyadh, and he's with us at the moment. His name is Nordin, and he's for Riyadh Silwan, and he's gonna tell us a story about his place and show us some. He's gonna share with us some pictures and things. So let me just make sure he knows how to use that and he can speak. Nordin, can you please unmute yourself and talk to people here? And also, I would like Ali, if you could. Hello, Nordin.
Hello, everybody.
Hello there.
Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Yeah.
We're great.
Hi.
Nice to be with you in live. Sorry, I don't speak good in English, but I go to speak French, and Abdou go to translate.
No problem. So, as Nordin said, yes. So as Nordin said, his English is not. He's trying to improve his English by the way, but we can understand. And if he's gonna talk in French, and if anybody has any questions or things, you can ask him, and I'll be translating what he says. Okay, guys.
Yep, that sounds good.
Great.
Great. So, yeah. Ali, can you hear us, Ali?
Sabdo? Yeah.
Yeah. Could you please, share us some of the pictures that Nordin prepared for the live tonight, and
Yes.
so people can do comments, please.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. Oh.
Là, comme vous voyez devant vous, ça c'est la porte du Riyad, c'est l'une des pièces maîtresses de notre chère maison. La porte, il date de 470 ans à peu près, parce que le quartier...
Yeah.
Hein?
Let me explain. Yes, good, very good. C'est bien, Nordin. Donc, Laissez-moi, comme ça, je peux parler en anglais, et comme ça, je vais
Ok.
exprimer aux gens là, comme ça, ils sont prêts.
OK.
Donc, as Nordin said, this is the front of Riyadh Salwan, and is what this piece is this door is about 4, is that right? 450, c'est ça?
470 années à peu près.
470. Okay, so he said the age of this door is like about 470 years. So it's really an old door.
Et le quartier en général est cité dans des livres d'histoire du XIVe siècle.
Yeah, so the street is one of the very, very old street in Medina, and it's the 14th century, which is really old place in the area of Dalbasha. It's in the old Medina.
Et le quartier, c'est un quartier qui est à proximité du palais d'Ar el-Bacha, qui est un chef-d'œuvre d'ailleurs architectural du XVIIIe siècle.
Yeah. So as I said, the street is one of the old street in Medina, which was made in the really long time ago, and in the 18th century, and it was not far from the palace in the corner, the Palace d'Al Basha, the one that belongs to the king at the moment. So it's one of the old palaces in Medina.
Et comme vous savez, dans l'histoire, les gens qui sont importants vivent toujours aux alentours du palais royal.
Yeah, and in that time, the very, very famous and very important people in this time, they live around the palace. All the houses around the Dalbasha Palace belong to these very famous people that time.
Alors, notre chère maison est une des plus belles qui soit autour de ce palais.
And our house is one of the very beautiful houses in this area, and it's around this palace as well, which is we're really proud of having this place in the area. Donc, ندوزو الفوتو الأخرى نور الدين سي بون.
نعم.
Ali, عفاك Ali, the next picture Ali, please.
Ça, c'est ma photo avec ma femme lors d'une réception d'anniversaire du patron du Riyad.
Yeah. So this picture is it shows Nordin and his wife, and it was for one of the very special birthday, and it was a party for him and his wife and the owner of the place, and they made this the meal was for the very special anniversary. Yeah.
Et les spécialités que vous voyez, bien sûr, ce sont des spécialités marocaines qu'on a préparées pour l'occasion.
Oui. And all this, the dishes that you see, the meals and all the salads and all that stuff, this Moroccan, the Moroccan food that his wife she made for this occasion.
Okay, and ندوزو الأخرى.
Okay. C'est bon. Allez, the next one.
Hein?
The same. This is the same. So yeah, c'est bon. Nordin, c'est la même, yeah?
Ça, c'est un dîner. C'est la photo du dîner qu'on présente au Riyad d'habitude pour nos clients. Et c'est toujours, on présente que la cuisine marocaine.
Yeah. So this is one of the kind of meals that we do for a guest, and it's always a Moroccan specialty. You can see here a tagine lamb with the prunes, the apricot and prunes, and the zalouk and all the Moroccan specialty, and it's one of the meals that we had always do for the guests. La photo أخرى Abdali.
Ça, c'est une de nos chambres. Comme vous voyez, on a des chambres qui sortent un peu de la tradition marocaine des chambres, parce que, comme vous savez, dans les anciennes maisons marocaines, les chambres sont un peu longues et étroites. Mais là, on a essayé d'ajouter un peu d'espace dans les chambres pour avoir un peu plus d'espace pour nos clients.
Yeah, so this is one of the rooms in Riyadh, and like normally the traditional house does not have this kind of the rooms doesn't look like that, but they have to make more space for a guest to walk around, and so they make it in a way which people can move around and do other party in the rooms, like bathrooms and area with the bedroom and stuff. L'autre Ali, next one please.
Ça, c'est une photo du Riyad depuis la terrasse, qui montre la terrasse et un peu du patio. Il montre aussi une des pièces maîtresses, comme la porte du Riyad, c'est le palmier qu'on a au milieu du Riyad.
C'est un autre palmier, c'est ça?
Hein?
C'est plus âgé, le palmier,
Non, le palmier, c'est... En fait, le palmier, il a été planté avec l'âge du Riyad. Quand on a reconstruit le Riyad, on a mis le palmier. Ça veut dire que le palmier, il a grandi au fur et à mesure avec le Riyad.
D'accord. So this is the view from the rooftop, and you can see around. This is one of the typical things for the Riyadh that belongs to the house, which is very old as well. And you can see the tree, the palmary tree in the middle, and the tree said that it was made, and they've done that tree when they're doing the constructions of the house. It gives a nice view for the area. And yeah, l'autre photo, Alice, s'il vous plaît.
Oui. Je l'ai qu'à faire.
C'est bon. That's it. So that's the only thing. Si vous avez quelque chose à ajouter, Nordin, and if not, I will
oui,
ask.
bien sûr. Je voudrais parler un petit peu de notre chère ville de Marrakech, qui est une des plus belles villes du Maroc et où il y a des sites qui sont maintenant patrimoine humanitaire par l'UNESCO. Et je peux rien ajouter à tout ça.
Très bien. So at the end, I would like to say Marrakech is one of the beautiful places that we love and has a lot of things and very famous places that look after UNESCO and a lot of museums and things for people to visit. And I would say thanks to everyone. So that's it, everyone. If you have any questions you would like to ask Nordin, I'm here to help with translating. And yeah,
And
the word for you guys. Thank you.
Can you thank Nuruddin for his generous donation of a room to the festival? And we hope we can fill the rest of his Riyadh with paying guests because it's a beautiful Riyadh. And thank you very much, Nuruddin.
You are welcome, sir. And I'm so glad to receive the storyteller of the world. And I hope to see you soon, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah, so your English is good. Your English is good. You have to talk in English next time.
Yeah, I try. I try, but I have difficulty to say what I have in my heart. That's why I prefer French.
You just need to improve it. You just need to improve it. If you join in a live, we have story every week. So if you are joining the live every day, you would make English better in a month.
Inshallah, inshallah. Why not?
You haven't heard my attempts at Moroccan, so you know.
His English is much better than my French. Please tell him that.
Questions, s'il vous plaît?
Comment?
No, I'm talking to these guys. If you have questions, please, guys. If you have questions, you want to ask Nordin why to stay with us. So please, ask.
Just thank him for his wonderful hospitality, and that once again, his English is much better than my French. Je parle un peu français.
Little bit. So you're welcome, and I go to see you, inshallah. I go to listen your stories, and I will be here anytime.
À bientôt.
Welcome, brother.
Mwah.
Merci beaucoup. Merci
And
beaucoup.
how
Au revoir.
many rooms has the Riyadh got?
So
Combien
we
de
have
chambres?
6 rooms, and we have in the first floor one salon for relaxing, for drinking in the evening with a fireplace, and we have also dinner room, and we have small swimming pool inside of the Riyadh. Okay, and we have also 2 rooms like suite, separate for the family. Sometimes the guests come with them children, and they stay together in same place. And we have 4 other rooms in the second floor, and 1 room, the most beautiful one, is in the terrace.
Sounds delightful.
Very good.
Yeah.
C'est bon.
Thank
Donc,
you.
c'est bon. Merci, merci Nolte. Merci, c'est très très gentil.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We look forward to seeing you out there very much. Thank you very much for that. And Abdu, thank you for hosting that that little session.
No
as
problem.
well. Yeah, that's
You're welcome, guys. Thank you. No problem. Thank you, guys.
I can tell you all out there that, that this room and beyond this Zoom room is buzzing with excitement for coming to Morocco, to seeing you all, and bringing our stories and meeting each other in the real world. And that may be the first time we all get together in the same place. And yeah, very, very excited. Thank you very much for that. So we're going to move on, and I had on my list for some reason Dave USA to be telling the story next, and then he sent me a little message saying, "Oh no, I can't talk. I've got something wrong with my laryngitis. Can't talk." So so I got that wrong, but that means we move swiftly past Dave and on to Maria Gillen. So if you are ready to tell us a tale, Maria, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely.
Floor's yours.
So, thank you so much for having me. It's a very unusual day in Ireland today. We have sun, so the whole of Ireland ran out this morning and said, "Yippee!" I just wanted to say before we start to use our storytelling imagination and imagine a place on this planet where all the storytellers of the world get together. And soon we won't have to imagine that, because we're all going to be in Marrakesh in February. A lot of my friends are asking me, if you're not a storyteller, can you still come? And the answer is yes. There are rooms in the Riyadhs for people who want to come, and without the listeners, there's no storytelling. So sign up. Everybody sign up for this fantastic festival. It's going to be the first of an amazing time of world storytelling, and I look forward to seeing you there in February. With that said, I'm going to tell you a story of travelling stories. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum, deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum, deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum, deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. How did all of our music cross the seas in years gone by, when people had no money to be able to buy instruments? How did they bring the stories and the songs in the boats across the sea? They did it with mouth music like I have just given you an example of, but also they brought the music home from far across the sea. And I wonder now, do you recognize this tune? This tune that's not Irish, but we've taken it in our mouth music. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum, deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. All the children in the whole village had the same dream. It was full of colours and in the background there was a tune. And the children would come down from their beds in the morning and they'd sit at the table and they'd start humming. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum. Deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. And the great grandmothers and the grandmothers and the mothers would give one another that knowing look, and they would look at the children. And when enough of the children in the village had hummed the tune, the mothers would go in the middle of the night and open the doors and say to the children, "Shh, come on now, come on, I'm going to show you the great secret." And all the children of the village would pour out onto the dark streets, the streets that were lit only by the stars twinkling up above and the big fat moon, the last moon, the brightest moon of the year. And they would go down the street, humming gently that little tune until they got to the edge of the forest. And they would be a little bit nervous because they could see the shadows that the branches of the trees made as the stars came down to light their way along the path. But the moon comforted them, and they went into the forest, feeling under their feet now Mother's heartbeat. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum. Deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. And in the middle of the forest there would be a big green hillock, Mother's breast, and they would put their hot little faces on the green hill and hear almost in their own bones Mother's tune. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum. Deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. And so it was, and so it is, and so it always should be. Except first the grandmothers forgot, then the great-grandmothers, and then the mothers. And the children, they still hear this tune, but they don't know what to do with the music. And Mother got sad. Do you remember when Mother got sad? When she made all of the rivers of the world swell with her tears. Deedle diddle deedle deedle diddle dum. Deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. She cried as she spread her waters over the villages and the cities. And people began to speak and talk, but they forgot to listen. So Mother got angry. Do you remember when Mother got angry? When she took all that fire in her belly and pushed it up through the mountain in Iceland, and the big white cloud came and it made all of the planes stop. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum. Deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum, she warned. And then people began to blame one another. It's your fault. It's your fault. I think it has something to do with that fella over there in America. I'm sure of it. But nobody listened. So Mother gathered all her energy and made a huge tsunami. Do you remember when she drowned that city in Japan with the tsunami? Whoosh! People listened then, and they began to tweet, and they began to look at television, and they began to get on their telephones. But they had forgotten what to do with Mother's song until a young girl woke up. She lived near a village. She came out in the middle of the night and found her own way down the path to the edge of the forest. The stars twinkled through the branches, and the big fat moon invited her down the path. She was afraid, but she felt sure from the tune that was coming through her feet, and she made her way into the middle of the forest and put her hot little face to Mother's breast. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum. Deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. And then, in her child's voice, she sang it back to Mother. Deedle diddle deedle dee deedle diddle dum. Deedle diddle deedle diddle deedle diddle dum. And everything stopped. And everything was still. For that is what Mother wanted. Do you know the tune yet? The tune that came all the way across the sea from the Native American Indian people. Mother, I feel you under my feet. Mother, I hear your heartbeat.
Thank you, Maria. Great story, a great story, and beautifully told, and of course a great lesson we should listen to. Reconnect, not, you know, when we lose touch with the important things, how we can become lost, but we soon get a little slap to remind us. So yeah, great. I've heard you tell that story a couple of times before, actually. It's lovely. Thank you for bringing that. Now I was thinking, it's maybe next week, because Orla is going to be, I believe, hosting an evening. I'm not sure yet. We're still talking about it. Orla, who's sadly had a bereavement in the family and can't be with us for these first couple of sessions. But I believe the talk is that we will have an all-Irish night. So, and the rest of us will be just sat watching whatever wonderful beauty it is that you all bring together, because apparently you might all be staying in the same riad. I don't know whether that's the thing or not. We will get a taste of
that
what
would be big trouble. Big trouble.
Yeah, you put all the Irish in one place.
We will get a taste of what that might look like.
The flaw with that is that the riads are donating one room, so we might have to put them in riads that are next to each other, near each other. But it will find some way, and I'm sure the Irish contingent will. We'll just. The rest of us will just go to wherever they are. We'll forget the festival. We'll just go to where the Irish contingent will be. It'll be that's going to be the life and soul.
Well, that doesn't mean to say that there won't be wonderful things happening elsewhere as well. But I know what you mean. And maybe they won't all be staying in one riad, but I'm sure that one riad will become the place where they all go.
Undoubtedly.
So we look forward to that. That might be the next one in July, or it might be the one following in August. That discussion is still happening. But anyway, Maria, thank you. That was lovely.
If I could just announce when, and because Gary doesn't know when the next one is, so it'd be really good if I told him. The next one will be on June the 27th, which is 4 weeks' time.
That's handy. Thank you.
I thought that'd be useful information for you, Gary.
Yeah, June the 27th, was that?
Absolutely, a Sunday. And Mike Rust, I have carefully adjusted that so it doesn't fit in, it doesn't clash with a worldwide story round. So I've been very careful there.
Great stuff. So moving on then, here's the thing. Here's a message from Dave. I'm really sorry, people. I'm really, really sorry. But I can't get back into the room, so I won't be here tonight. I don't know if that's Dave's voice. In fact, I know that it's not, but that was my interpretation of Dave's voice.
Well, you don't speak very good Norfolk, Gary, on account of the fact that you're from the West Country.
Well, I'm definitely living in the West Country at the moment. Anyway, I won't go into it. You're right. No. Anyway, so Dave won't be with us tonight, sadly, but maybe we'll get the chance to have Dave hosting this session another time. But as John said at the beginning, it will happen, and it is happening still. Dave or no Dave. John, did you get my message saying, would you tell the story after Shelley, who's coming next? Thumbs up if that's a... Yeah, great. So our next story is Shelley, who I think I may have heard you tell a story before, but I'm not quite sure. But Shelley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gary. You can hear my story now if you haven't
Yeah.
heard it. So I wanted to give a little bit of backstory before I tell the main story, if I may. So one of my earliest childhood memories growing up in India was spending my summer vacation at my maternal grandparents' home. So my Nanu, my grandfather, he owned a small flour mill. It was called Kashmiri Lal Aate Di Chakki. It was right in the middle of the bazaar. Now, in the afternoon, when the entire household would be asleep, I would sneak out of the house and go and visit my Nanu, much to his amusement. And I would sit there for hours, sniffing the grain, smelling the grains, my hair all white with the powder coming from the mill. And I would just sit there watching the noise and din of the bazaar. I loved it. But my favorite were the Tuesdays, because Tuesday was the day of the Mangal Bazaar, the Tuesday Bazaar, where men and women, they would just take over the entire neighborhood. They would bring out their treasures, trinkets, jewelry, spices, household utensils, clothes, everything basically. And they would just spread out their wares on the ground. And their positions were more or less fixed. Like right in front of my Nanu's house, there were 3 brothers who used to sell towels, hand towels, bath towels. And these 3 brothers, I still remember them. They were tall, fair-skinned, very prominent, handsome nose. And they wore a very odd-looking, loose-fitting salwar kameez. And they spoke a language that sounded foreign to me. You see, they spoke in Pashto. And these 3 brothers, they were refugees from Afghanistan. The neighborhood where my grandparents lived, it was known as Mini Kabul. And I named these 3 brothers Kabuliwalas after a very famous story that was written by Rabindranath Tagore in the late 19th century. So this story somehow always reminds me of those 3 Afghan brothers, and quite organically leads me, to those sensorial memories of the Mangal Bazaar that I used to love. So this story is called The Magic Saddleback. Now, high up in the Hindu Kush mountains, which ran through the center of Afghanistan all the way to Pakistan, there lived 3 brothers, Masood, Hamid, and Ali. Now, their parents had died when they were very young, and now they had grown up into handsome young men. They were ready to leave the village and seek their fortunes, wherever life would take them. Being in the center of the Silk Road, many a caravans, kafirs had passed through their village, and they had told them of those long roads snaking through the mountain passes, down into the hidden valleys, filled with sweet apricots and flowers. And they had told them stories about the kings who ruled from their splendid palaces and the extravagant, lavish feasts that they held for the visitors. They wanted to experience all these wonders for themselves. But before they set off, the elders of the village, they advised them. And they told them, now listen, go and seek your fortune, but always keep your ears open for any message that God might send your way. And remember, take what you are given and no more. And of course, help others and you will be helped too. So the brothers, they set off on their long, arduous journey through the difficult mountain passes and unknown lands. And they finally arrived at the plains, and it was night. And they decided to rest for a while. And, that night, Mahsood, he had a very strange dream. Bells were ringing in his ear, and a voice called out to him, Mahsood, Mahsood, wake up, wake up. Dig down the earth below and you will find gold. Mahsood woke up with a start, and it was almost daybreak. He started to dig at once. His brothers thought he had gone mad. But sure enough, there was gold in the ground. And soon his pockets were jingling with all the gold coins. And he said, that's enough for me. I think that's enough for me to build a house and marry a beautiful girl and settle down. That's it, brothers. My journey is over. I wish you good luck. And he went on his way. Now, Hamid and Ali, they were quite pleased at his fortune, but they were sad to see him go. And they continued on their journey till they came upon a great forest. And it was already night, and they settled down under a huge tree. This time, Hamid, he had that strange dream. But not the bells. The trumpets were blowing loudly in his ear, and a voice called out to him, Hamid, Hamid, wake up, wake up. Dig down the ground below and you will find jewels. So Hamid, he woke up with a start and he started to dig at once, and he struck gold. Well, not literally, but he pulled out a pot which was full to the brim with precious jewels of every kind. And oh boy, oh my God, Ali, my fortune has finally smiled at me. I don't want to do anything else. I just want to go home, build a house and marry a beautiful girl and settle down. I wish you luck, brother. Ali was left alone. Has God forgotten about me? Why is my journey so long and theirs so short? And then he suddenly remembered, you see, everybody has a different journey and a different fate. So bravely, he picked up his sack and he continued on. He plunged into the forest. And very soon he had nothing left to eat, nothing to drink. And to be very honest, in that deep, dense forest, he was beginning to feel a bit scared. So he climbed on the top of the tree to have a better look out to see where he was heading. But at the top of the tree, wherever he looked, whichever direction he looked, there were only trees, nothing else. I guess it's my fate to die here. So he climbed down. But oh my, to his surprise, he found on the ground a beautifully embroidered saddleback. He picked it up. Maybe it has some food inside. But it was empty. Oh, this is my bit of luck, and such a bad luck too. Mahsood, he gets gold. Hamid, he gets silver. And what do I get? This worn out saddleback? Oh, I wish it had some food for me to eat. And he was about to throw the saddlebag, but he realized that the saddlebag was suddenly heavy and it was suddenly aromatic. And he opened the saddlebag and it was full of roast chicken and fresh bread, cheese and ripe fruit and cool sharbat to drink. And Ali, he ate and he ate and he stuffed his mouth and he stuffed his face. And when he was done, and when he got his senses back, he realized that it was a magic saddleback. I wonder what else could it do? Look at me now. My clothes are all in rags. Oh, I would love to have a nice suit. Oh, and a fine pair of boots, please. And his saddlebag was again heavy. And he pulled out a nice fur-lined jacket, smart woolen salwar, and handcrafted leather boots, just the right size. And he was about to wish for more, but then he suddenly remembered, oh, don't be greedy, don't be greedy. And so with his newfound luck, the newfound saddlebag, he continued forward with his journey. And whenever he felt hungry or thirsty, he used his magic saddleback. So he walked through the forest for 6 days, and finally he saw light at the end of the tunnel. He saw some fields and orchards. And he was so happy that finally he would have some human company. Oh boy, he was getting mad talking to himself. So he went to the first house, which was set in a pretty garden, and he knocked boldly. And an old woman, dressed in all black, answered it. And he said, "Salam alaikum, Abi. Could you please give me shelter for the night? You see, I have been on the roads for many days. My brothers, they have found their fortune, but I am still seeking mine." And she said, "Of course, certainly. I would be delighted to host you. In fact, I have a son of your age. He would love to meet you. But tell me something. You've traveled all the way here and you haven't found anything?" And she gave him such, sharp, curious looks that Ali was obliged to show his saddlebag to her. And he said, "Oh, just this old saddlebag, nothing else. It was empty." He did not tell her anything about the magical powers of the saddlebag. You got to keep some things quiet, you see. That evening, the son came back home and they all sat down for supper. Some fragrant rice and vegetables. But then the mother suddenly realized, oh my God, I forgot to get the meat. And Ali's, being the helpful man that he was, he said, no, don't worry. And secretly, he whispered his wish for just enough meat for the 3 of them. And sure enough, he pulled out the meat from the bag. And the mother and the son, they were amazed. "Are you a magician?" And Ali, he bit his lip. "Oh, well, I just wanted to help. No way." And he said, no. I'm just an ordinary man, but this bag is a little bit special. And they pressed him for more information. Where did you find it? How do you use it? But Ali just kept quiet. That night, the young man, not Ali, the young man, he was determined to get his hands on that magic saddlebag. So as Ali slept on the floor in front of the warm stove, he bent down and he picked up the saddlebag, examined it, but he really didn't know what to do with it. But Ali was only pretending to sleep. And he realized that he had to leave, otherwise this bag would be stolen. So even before dawn, he was gone, and by midday, he had walked miles away from that house. And then he came to a great wide river. And just very close to the banks, there was a little hut, and a fisherman was sitting outside mending his net. Now, for the sake of time and to keep the long story short, let me just say that Ali, he spent the evening at the fisherman's house, and he realized that the fisherman needed his help. You see, the fisherman's wife had been kidnapped by the robbers. And so Ali, he just whispered his wish into the bag. And to the fisherman's surprise and shock, his wife emerged out of the bag. But then, as luck would have it, the fisherman and his wife, they plotted to get the bag, to steal the bag from Ali. And Ali heard the plan, and he had to leave again. And this time Ali had learned his lesson. But he continued on with his journey. And as he was walking, his mind was heavy, his heart was heavy, and his feet were sore, and he was exhausted. He just wanted to sit when he heard a voice. "Help, help, oh God, help. Please, let someone hear me, please." He followed the voice, and he saw on the ground a young woman who was all tied up in rope. Ali took out his knife and he cut the ropes and set her free. And the woman, her throat was so parched, she could hardly utter any word. And then she said, "Give me some water." And Ali gave her some water. And finally, after a sip or two, she said that her name was Zamila, and her stepmother had plotted against her, had made her her slave, and she had been kidnapped by the robbers while she was running away from her stepmother, and they had left her there to die. So please take me back to my father. I'm sure he will reward you. So Ali said, yes, of course, I'll take you back to your father. But let's give you some nice clothes. You see, her whole clothes were in rags and she was not even wearing any shoes. So he whispered the wish into the saddleback. And then he pulled out beautiful pair of pink silk trousers and a velvet tunic of deep red, golden slippers and a gossamer veil. And she looked like a young, beautiful princess wearing them. And together they walked on to their father's house. And before long, they were in front of a big, huge house set in the middle of the orchard. And as she walked in, her father, his joy knew no bounds. His joy knew no bounds, and he was so happy. He had been told by his wife that she had drowned in the river. And when he heard how his daughter had been mistreated by the stepmother, he wasted no time in throwing her out of the house. And then he welcomed Ali with open arms, and he asked him to stay as long as he wanted to. And Ali, he said, yes, of course, yes. For he looked into Jamila's eyes and he knew that he had found his fortune, that he did not travel the world anymore. And so they both were married and they lived happily. And the magic saddleback, well, it served them too till the end of their lives. And that is how those three brothers, they found their fortune. Now, I don't know what happened to the three Afghan brothers in the Mangal Bazaar, but I just hope and pray that they also found the fortune and the life that they came seeking for. Thank you.
That's a lovely story,
Thank
Shirley. Thank you. Really enjoyed that, and a great all-long the story, the journey in itself, wasn't it? But yeah, it's fabulous and beautifully told as well. I thought, yeah, I was drawn in, totally captivated. Great. And where's that story from? I've not. Well, Afghanistan. Yeah.
Yes, from Afghanistan.
Yeah. I suddenly remembered. Yeah, it was a great tale. I've not heard many tales from that part of the world actually, so nice for you to bring that. Are you in India? Do you live in India?
No, I live in Switzerland at the moment.
Okay, so it's not midnight gone. No, that's okay. So you're okay to stay with us. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I'm trying to remember all of the events that happened in it. And yeah, it would be a nice story to tell in the future. Thank you. John.
Fantastic. And it's quite appropriate that the hero of that story was Ali, really, who is our hero for he's kept this magic carpet flying for months and months and months. So there's I thought I'd just whittle on and finish with a traditional story, but of my connection with Morocco, because I first came in 1968, and I tend to travel by coincidence, and I've traveled by coincidence my whole life. And in 1968, my flatmate said his friend Andrew, who was an American, it was time of the Vietnam War, and he would like to travel, but he didn't want to travel courtesy of the US Army. And so he was in Europe as a perpetual student, doing postgraduate course after postgraduate course after postgraduate course to avoid the draft, and which he did successfully. He owned an Austin A35 car, so not many people had cars in those days, but not many young people. But Andrew had this old Austin A30 or 35, whatever it was, car, and so the three of us decided, well, those two decided they were going to Morocco in it, and would I care to come along? And so the answer is obviously yes. So it kind of got there, got down through Spain, got to there. We had it serviced in Tangier, which might not have been a mistake, and then and we're going across the desert, and we got a puncture, and so in those days cars had sort of a jack that went into a jacking point at the side, and you wound it up. But those jacking points, especially on old cars, the sort of old cars that young people could own, the jacking points had rusted through. So there it was, we put in the jack and we wound up, and all that we ended up was rust in the sand, and the car refused to lift. And we're looking at it thinking, this is a bit of a conundrum. We're in the middle of a desert. We've got a puncture. How are we going to change the wheel? When out of nowhere appeared a dozen young men who picked up the car. We changed the wheel, put the car down. Andrew thanked them in French because he spoke French. He was the one of us who did. And they melted back into, they sort of kind of melted back into the desert. It was indeed, and it was at that point I realized that Morocco is a magic country. And so we carried on and finished the trip in Essaouira, where we stayed in a riad. I didn't know what a riad was. I didn't know it was a riad I was staying in. It was before people were picking them up. It was 68, so before they were being done up, and it was just Bareilly in its original state. And we came back, and we came back through Paris while the Sorbonne was going off, and didn't know about that, wondered why people kept kicking us in the railway station, two hippies trying to sleep in the railway station while we waited for the train the next day. And then I didn't go back. I lost touch, sort of like one of those places I must go back to. And then nearly 50 years later, 2015, I had a stroke. And the beginning of 2016, Sarah Corbett, who's associated with Mike Woods and with the Henna Cafe and everything, said, the only place you're really going to get better is Marrakesh. And took me down there, and they put me in a riad there, which was in a far different situation than the one I'd seen in 68. And one of it was, again, you just take hospitality where it comes. And I had no idea that I had met Mike. I'd met him later that trip when I told a story at a dinner of his, but it was Mike providing the hospitality, bless his heart. And so began that association. But one of the places I was taken was Cafe Clock, which was where there were the English couples that owned it, and they turned it into an arts cafe. And twice a week they had storytelling. And the Hajj, who was, or everyone called him the Hajj, I can't remember, his Ben Hajj, was kind of like the Moroccan version of Duncan Williamson. And so he was running, like Duncan would run a Kaylee, and he'd just put himself, he'd tell a story, and then he'd get everyone else to tell a story. And he'd been the chief storyteller on the square, but the square became impossible, too noisy to tell stories and to commercialize. So but he wanted to pass on the tradition. He ran this twice a week, and he was passing on the tradition to the young storytellers. The tradition is still going on. And I sat I did a story, obviously, for the whole cafe, and it was great because it was the first one that I'd actually done after the stroke, and it was, it felt a real victory to actually have completed it and remembered it. I had huge holes in my memory cells. But then I sat in the corner with the Hajj, and we were just two white-haired old geezers sitting in the corner swapping stories. And one of the younger storytellers was translating the Arabic into English and vice versa. And I gave him one of Duncan's stories, and this is the story he gave me. And it is a bit of a traveling story, because this is from way back in time. And, you know, I'd do the long ago and hold the long. But let me say, it was that long ago that my hair was dark and my beard was ginger and all my teeth were my own. And there was a king, and he loved stories, and he loved storytellers. And he sent out a proclamation: any storyteller that wants to come along the palace and tell stories, you can, and you'll be fed. Well, you know, we have a room full of storytellers here, and, you know, free food, free board and lodging. Yeah. So obviously his palace was soon full of storytellers. Now, storytellers will eat you out of house and home. And so I know, but that I might be casting Mr. Anyway, whatever. But anyway, so soon, you know, he'd send down the kitchen for a sandwich, and the message would come back saying, "No bread. The storytellers have eaten it all." So he thought, well, I can't just say I don't want any more stories, but I can set a task. Let anyone. You can tell me a story, but it's got to be never ending. And you can try, and if you fail, it's, you know, I don't want to be harsh, but, you know, I know you're all going to try, so I better put something. If you fail, I'm going to cut off your head, and I'm going to put it on a spike around the parapets. I know Maria's looking at me and thinking that's a bit harsh. So anyway, plenty came, plenty tried, you know. You know, there's a lot of flies, but not all of them can make honey. But till eventually, you know, and the parapets are full of spike. You know, each spike has got a head on, and you know, well, you know, when we're young storytellers, and some of us don't grow out of it, you know, we think we're better than we are. Actually, some of the young tellers that keep coming on are better than we are, but most are. But but they thought they could do it, but they fail halfway through, you know, and they get their head cut off. Until one day, this guy turns up and he says, "I want to take up this challenge. I think I've got a never-ending story." And he was a nice looking fella and pleasant enough, and the king really didn't want to cut off his head. He said, "You know, are you sure? Look at those heads up there." He said, "No, I'll do it." He starts. Long ago, when all the animals could talk to each other and chickens still had teeth, the king of the ants was out with his army. And there was a great storm, and they were looking for somewhere to shelter. And they saw a cave. They went in that cave. And as their eyes came accustomed to the light, they saw a great mountain of wheat in front of them. And the king turned round to 4 of his strongest ants and said, "Take one of those grains and carry it back to the anthill." Well, the story of that journey back to the anthill, I mean, there were many adventures. There were storms that had to duck out under leaves to avoid birds of prey. And, well, if I actually told you the whole adventure, no one else would get a chance to speak tonight. So let's say it just took a month or 2 to get back, and they took them less time to come back to the cave. And they got back to the cave, and the king of the ants turns around and says, "Now take a second grain and carry it back to the anthill." And by the time he got to the 5th grain, the king turned around and said, the storyteller, and said, "How long is this going to take?" He said, "About a year." He said, "Well, come back in a year's time and tell me the rest of the story." So he came back in a year's time and just carried on with the last grain of wheat. But behind that mountain of wheat was a mountain of lentils. So by the time they got to the 5th lentil, the king is saying, well, how long will it take to get through that mountain of lentils? About a year, he said. Well, come back in a year. He came back in a year, the last lentils taken. Behind the mountain of lentils was a mountain of rice. The storyteller said, before I start, I want to marry your daughter. And the king said, that's not fair. And the storyteller looked up at all the heads around the parapet and pointed to the king and pointed heads. He said, do you think that's fair? And the king said, well, you got a point. And he let him marry his daughter. And they started with the rice thing and, you know, obviously come back in a year. Well, in a year, the king's daughter by this time had had a young son. And when the storyteller presented himself in front of the king in a year's time, the king said, I think you've won. After all, it would be very bad form for me to cut off the head of my grandson's father. And from that day on, they lived in luxury. And as we know, royal families have several palaces. And they lived in one of the spare palaces for the rest of time. And may all you other storytellers have that much luck.
Well, that's a great story, John. And I'm very become aware that I just been typing away and unmuted. I hope that didn't disturb what was going on there. But it was a great story and probably the longest preamble to a story that I've heard in the history of storytelling. But I enjoyed the preamble as well, and I thought it was fabulous. And it just made me think of a couple of little things, if you don't mind me. My uncle Pete, he went traveling across America in the 70s, and he told me about this. One of the jobs that he had was to take a car from like somewhere high up in America and across the desert to somewhere in Texas or something like that. And of course, 50-mile-an-hour speed limit everywhere you go. He said he came over the brow of this hill and there was a road that just went like 30 miles in a straight line and not a building, nothing in sight on any side, just open desert on either side of the road. He was like, 50 miles an hour. He got a mile or two along that bit of road. He's like, I can't just be driving along here at 50 miles an hour. So he put his toe down. He said, like 30 seconds later, he's got like, where did they come from? They must have been hiding behind a cactus, but he was pulled over and done for speeding. Anyway, that was just when you were talking about the guys who came out of nowhere and picked the car up. It just put that straight in my mind.
I only got pulled once for speeding in Texas, and I'd come over a brow of a hill at about 90, and I saw the highway patrolman ahead, and I slowed down, but he stopped me anyway. He said, "You got a radar in that thing?" I said, "No, I've got a good pair of eyes." And he said, we went through the business, and then he said, "Good job, it's on 5 o'clock, or you'll be following me down the road to see the judge and pay a fine." And he just wrote me offender, but no penalty on it.
That have been the same hill, but you got more luck than my uncle. Anyway. Great. Well, we're going to move on swiftly. There was something else that I was going to say, but it doesn't matter. It was a great tale. I'll see if I can remember that one for the future as well. That's a lovely one. And next on our list was Mike Rust. And I don't know if you got my message, Mike, because you didn't pop back.
I didn't see a message, but I'm happy to.
Yeah, the message was, would you go after John?
Right enough, fair enough. I've done many of these over the years, one way or another. So it was Maria who was talking about telling stories over in Ireland. I've been over there. The fellow I used to go and meet was John Campbell. He's not with us anymore. But, he was a great fellow, and he told many Irish stories, and he used to tell stories with mouth music. But Gary, for once there was a king, and he was not a good king, and he wasn't a bad king, but he was a lonely king. He just said he didn't have a wife and he didn't have any children because nobody really wanted to be Mrs. King in his kingdom. So he was there and he was lonely. But he'd been persuaded, for one reason or another, that the laws needed to be harsher. And the laws got harsher and harsher and harsher. And one day there was a man and he looked down at his little family, and he was a shepherd. And he lived up in the hills here in Shropshire, and Shropshire is halfway up against the Welsh hills, and we lived there. And there was no food in the house, so we went and stripped a quarter. Now, some of you won't know what I mean by that. But going and stripping a quarter means you take one of the udders of a cow and you empty it of milk. And so the cow's got the 3 other udders. So when the farmer goes and he milks the cow, he just thinks the cow is having a bad day. So you take out 1/4 of the milk, and it was warm milk, and he took it back, but he was seen. And he was seen, and the soldiers came and the sheriff came and they put him in the jail for stripping a quarter. Now the law said he was to be hung. And so he was sent in front of the king, and the king looked at him and said, "You will be hung tomorrow at 12 o'clock midday, for that's what the laws of my land said. I've had enough of these people disobeying me all the time." And his friend came along, and he looked at the king and he looked at his friend and he said, "You can't do that." And the king said, "Why can't I do it?" And he said, "Because his daughter is due to be married at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And he has to go and give his daughter away. And then there's going to be the do. So you can't marry him. You can't hang him before his daughter is married." And the king said, "I will and I can." And so his friend said, "I'll tell you what we'll do. I'll take his place. I'll go and sit in the jail. And if he doesn't come back by tomorrow midday to take my place and then be hung, you hang me instead." And the king looked at him and said, "Would you do that?" And he said, "Yes, he's my friend." "How do you know he's going to come back?" "You're going to come back?" He said, I will come back. He's my friend, he said. He'll come back." And he turned and he walked and he sat in the jail. But the king didn't know what to do. He said, "Okay, just go and do it." And so he left and he took a journey. And the journey was about 3 or 4 hours. And he had to cross a bridge and he had to go through a little town. But he just got to the church in time. For here, this is a Christian story. There's many faiths in the world, but this one was based in the Christian story. And just as his daughter came, he was stood at the front of the church and he turned round to his daughter and he said these words, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And she said, "Yes, he's my lover." When the world was created, God made beings and he had 2 heads, he had 4 arms, and he had 4 legs. And something happened and they were cut in half. And so now people walk around with 1 head and 2 arms and 2 legs. But some people join together again and they join for life. And the man standing waiting for me is my soulmate there. And he said, "Let's get on with the wedding." And he walked down the aisle and he gave his daughter away, and he was the happiest man on this world, for she looked truly beautiful. And for a lady who can, on her wedding day, to look truly beautiful, she has to look truly beautiful on the outside, but her heart must be happy. And everything inside must be kind and happy and joyful. And the two combine to make a beautiful woman. And that day she was a beautiful woman. And she looked round after the words had been said, and she saw the proudest dad in the world. Well, they went to the do, and they had a drink, and they had a dance, and they had a ceilidh, and they did all sorts of things, and he danced with everybody and enjoyed himself. And at 12 o'clock midday, honestly, this is the first drink of the day. He had a few, but he didn't have many. And he was up at 6 o'clock the next morning, He had to take the journey back because he knew his friend was in prison. And if he didn't get back by 12 o'clock, they'd hang his friend. Well, he turned, but it had been raining in the mountains and it had washed the bridge away. And he got to the bridge and it wasn't there, but there was one single rope. And the river was a torrent, but he knew he had to get across that river. And he grabbed hold of the rope and he just hung on to the rope and he took his hand over and he took his hand over and his body was swept away. And he knew he was going to be washed away, but he just knew that if he was washed away, he wouldn't get back to his friend and his friend would be hung. And he hung on so tight that he made it across the river. And he sat down there and he knew that by the sun, the time was passing and he stood up and he started jogging. As he started jogging, he came to the little town. But the little town, it was a Sunday morning and there was a great big procession going on and there was a carnival and there were thousands of people all there and they were all singing. And he knew he had to get through the people. And he started pushing his way through the crowds of people. And they stopped him. He said, "You can't come through. You've got to come with us. You've just got to come slowly up to the church, to the big cathedral." Where, "No," he said, "I've got to get through. I'm not coming to the service. You've got to let me through." And they started pushing him back, but he pushed and he pushed. And in the end, they stopped him. And it was causing so much fuss that the priest turned around and asked him what was so important. He said, "I've got to get back because if I don't get back by midday to the capital, they're going to hang my friend." And the priest said in the end, "Let him go." But time now, he looked up at the sun and the sun was coming up and he knew he wasn't going to make it. And he started running as fast as he could. And in the end, he got to the citadel. As he got to the citadel, the doors were there. But the king, he knew what was happening. And he saw him running up. And he said to his soldiers, "Close the doors. He should have been here by midday. He's only got half an hour to do. Let's see what he will do for his friend." So they closed the great big portcullis. But it didn't stop him. He took one look and he shinned straight up and he shinned straight over the wall. And he stood at the top and he looked down and the soldiers were there and they said, "You'll have to catch me. I've got to get there before midday." And he jumped down and the soldiers, he just landed on him. They rolled out of there and he broke his leg. And as he broke his leg, he stood up, but he wasn't going to stop. And he kept on walking with a broken leg. And finally, he just got into the square. And into the square was his friend. And he was standing on the scaffold and he had the rope around his neck. And the king was there and he looked at him and said, "You made it by 5 minutes. Take the rope off that man." And they took the rope off that man. And the king looked at the two of them and said this, "What am I going to do with you two? What should I do with you two? You two friends, when all this has happened. And we've watched you come and get back. You were desperate to get back. You jumped and landed and you broke your leg. But even though you broke your leg, you walked here. What am I supposed to do with two people like you?" And they both looked at him and they both looked at each other and they went, "You're my king, but we're friends." And the king said this word, "I'll let you both off on one condition. I'll send you to the hospital and I'll send you off. And I'm going to review these laws because these laws are too harsh. And my kingdom's not a happy place and I want it to be a happy place. But I'll let you off on one condition." And the two friends looked at him and said, "What's your condition?" And the king said, "If I can be the third friend, I'll let you both free." And they looked at him and they said, "You can be our friend. But a friendship is both ways. If someone's wrong, they'll tell you. If someone's right, they'll be happy for you. But a friend is for life, Simon. And if you can lift one hand at the end of your life and say you've got 4 friends by the fingers of your friend and a great friend by the thumb, you'll be a lucky man." And the king said, "I'll do it. If you'll make me my third friend, I promise to stand like that." So that's what was done. So once a week, the 3 friends would meet. And it was a Thursday night. And this is an English story from England. It's a Celtic story, but it's an English story from England. So Shelley, who comes from different cultures and everything else, you just have to accept that 3 white men go to the pub once a week. And they sit there and they have a drink and they talk about all sorts of things. And they're happy. For they have sweetness. The first drink of the day.
Great tale. Thank you, Mike. And is that from the Shropshire? Is that from the Borders, that story? Or you wedged it into...
You were talking about Duncan Williamson.
I was.
And we had an argument over that one about 15, 20 years after we first met. Because
You had an argument with Duncan Williamson? That's unheard of.
Oh, absolutely. Because I reckon I got it from him and he reckoned he got it from me. So I don't know. But I reckon I probably got it from a pub somewhere up in the hills in Shropshire. But Amy Douglas says I say that a lot about my stories, but I do go to a lot of pubs in the hills in Shropshire. Anyway, it was a journey story. So I thought that was the theme for tonight.
No, that's great. Wherever you got it from, you brought it and you gave it to us. And so the story carries on with its journey. Thank you very much for that, Mike. See if you can remember that one as well. We're going to picking up all these lovely new stories to share with everybody else. Okay. Where were we? Norman has come into the room. Hello, Norman. Welcome to the space. And you had a little bit of trouble getting in, but you found your way here in the end. Now, Norman might be in a position to tell us about the 3 books that are being raffled. So just in case you've joined us elsewhere on this evening session, let me just remind you that this is a fundraiser for the festival, the Storytelling Festival in Marrakesh, which will take place in February of 2022. It'll be the first international storytelling festival taking place there. And so if you have a donation to give, I think that you can find and John might remind us at the end of where you can go to do those, to give your donations. But if you do donate towards the festival, your name will go into a hat, and on the very, very last session, which would be of Rock the Kasbah, which will be in January of 2022, we will draw the names out of the hat. And now I will let Norman tell you what you stand to win.
Okay, this is backwards to me. I assume it's forwards to you. And don't look back, Jack. And it's appropriate because the theme is journeys. And by story too boring to tell, I have an extra copy of this book, and it has Duncan's signature in it with best wishes, which is left blank after that. So if you put in a donation, your name will go into the hat to possibly win this. And you can say that I got this from Duncan Williamson himself. If you like to take the truth to places where it's never been before. This is in partly to pay back Duncan for some of the wonderful things I've gotten from him, including the story and an incredible cup of tea at 5 o'clock in the morning on the way up to Orkney. So he was quite a remarkable person. So I'm hoping that, Gary, that we did work out a way that the names could be then properly pulled out. And I forget what we said about multiple donations.
I won't announce what we said about multiple donations at this point because we haven't fully squared that circle. But talking of circles, I have got a digital wheel, and people's names will go onto the digital wheel, and then I press the button and it spins and makes a nice clicky noise, and everybody's like watching and waiting and whoa.
And I will have all the names, because when you donate, your name comes up. It looks like you're giving money to me, but it's a separate account I've set up. Festi Fund. It's not coming to John. It's not buying my bread and cheese. Honest. So I've just got all that in a separate PayPal account called Festi Fund. But so I have all the names.
Yeah. So if you give the names to me, and I'll put the names onto the digital wheel. We'll press the button, and it'll spin. And the first name that it lands on will win the book that Norman's just showed us. And then there are 2 more books, I believe, to come.
This
after.
one, King of the Cats, and Round Me Rings. legends of bells, because storytellers love themed collections from my experience. So this will be a chance to put some broaden your storytelling shelf. And yeah, I guess that's about all I can properly say.
I think that's great at the time being, Norman. And what I'm going to say now is, if you don't mind me cutting in quickly, a couple of the other storytellers who were in the space we're going to tell tonight didn't realize that the session was going on for more than an hour, so they've slipped off. I think we're probably coming to the end of the session, coming towards it. Norman, you asked if you could tell a story, so if you could tell your story, followed by Babasi, who has a personal travel story, which is a very short one, and we can maybe finish on that. And so, Norman, over to you, as you are already.
Okay, thank you. I love travel, and I don't know how I got lost, but I found my way here. Well, to get right into it, there was a storyteller, and he was on the road. What else? There's lots of places to tell stories, and he came to a kingdom where the king welcomed all travelers and storytellers. And so the storyteller was brought to the king's table because it was time for the evening meal. And the king made him welcome. The storyteller sat down, and the king said, well, you are most welcome here. You shall have the best room that I can give you, and you will be fed, and you can tell a wee tale or two. But I must let you know that I have a rule. As you know, all storytellers are liars, and I do not abide liars in my kingdom. Everyone must tell the truth, except unless they're a storyteller. But if you happen to tell a lie at my table, then you will be beaten out of this castle, out of this kingdom, and you shall never return. So, be warned. Well, sure, easy enough, said the storyteller. A storyteller is as easy with the truth as they are with a lie, most of the time. Anyways, so the first course came up. It was soup. And it was delicious soup. I can't describe it to you because it would take as long as the lentils, etc., etc., etc. So at the end of that course, the storyteller had eaten 4 bowls. And the king says, wow, you ate a lot. Are you full? Oh, I'm full, said the storyteller. Okay, well, that's too bad. You're going to miss the next course, which is beef. And the fine beef roast it was, roast potatoes. I happen to like mashed turnips, and so the king was eating away at this meal, and he noticed that the storyteller was watching every bite that he ate, and he says, would you like to have some beef? He says, I'd love to have some. Well, that's the first lie you said you gave, said the king, but since I'm in a good mood, you can stay and eat. So the storyteller ate 4 slices of beef and turnips, and he said, that was fine. Well, I guess then you're going to miss dessert, said the king, because it's chocolate cake. And the cake was brought. It was a delicious cake. It was being sliced for the king. And the king noticed that the storyteller was kind of drooling. And he says, are you still hungry? Can you eat some more? Yes, I could eat some more of that cake. And so the storyteller was given a nice big piece of cake. And as big as it was, he ate it up, every crumb. Well, said the king, you've shown a good appetite and a good ability to tell lies because you've told a few of them. Well, before you go, I'll give you one chance to explain yourself, if you can. The storyteller said, well, I think I can do that. Get a chest. First of all, you must follow my instructions. Get a chest full of rocks and bring it in, and I'll show it to you. And the king was intrigued and puzzled, but the chest of rocks was brought, and the storyteller said, look at the chest. Yes, said the king, what am I seeing? Well, what do you think? Well, it's full of rocks. Well, yes, it's definitely full of rocks. As full as rocks it can be. Well, then, now I want you to bring some sand. And the buckets of sand were brought and poured in between the rocks until it was level. And the storyteller says, well, What do you think now? Well, I think it's full of rocks and sand. Right, said the storyteller. Now bring some water. And water was brought. And this time the water was poured in. And the water went in 1, 2, 3 buckets until at last it could not hold another drop of water. Now, said the storyteller, what do you think? I think it's pretty full. Not a drop more can go in. Well, that's the way it was with me, said the storyteller. After each course, I was full. But when I saw what was to be eaten, I knew there was room for more. And so I was telling the truth as I knew it each time. I may be a storyteller, but I can also tell stories that are full of truth and lies. And the king laughed. He laughed so hard and he said, then you shall stay in the finest room as I promised. And the next morning, the storyteller was set on his way with a fine bag of gold. And may we find such luck on our journey as storytellers in the great wide world.
Thank you for that one, Norman. Thank you. And I think there's a great lesson in there for all of us. There's always enough room for cake. Great. Where did you say you picked that one up? Remind me.
I found it years and years and years ago, and I told it yesterday. No, 2 days ago at storytelling, and a fellow told me it's an old teaching story that therapists and whatnot love to use, but he was not able to give me a source for it. I must have learned it 30 or more years ago, so I've the memory of where I got it. It's possibly from some other storyteller. Anyone knows where that story might come from?
I heard it in university, and I was told that it was demonstrated in a physics lab in the USA. So and it does the rounds of the internet. But I loved your telling of it because it makes it memorable. So yeah, loved it, Norman.
Yeah, so it's a really old story, Norman. It goes back a long time. I know it coming back into the medieval times and before.
Okay, then.
Around in the medieval times, Mike.
It was an old story. Yeah.
Yeah, I adapted it to the storyteller because I thought it, because truth and lies, etc.
The monks used to use it from the Priory and Wenlock, and that goes back a long time.
Mike, I thought you were telling us that you were around in the medieval times when you knew it from.
I am that old nowadays, mate. Don't you worry. Me and John between us, mate. Don't you worry about it. It's like my new picture.
I do.
That's me on my old tractor.
I thought it was the back of you on your old tractor, boy.
That would be right. All right. Keith's got one like that as well.
Who?
Keith.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So you can all get together then on a tractor convention.
We're going to. It's called Festival. The tractor run.
Now you're getting more Dave Tom, Gary.
yeah. I came out my birthday once. I was my 50th birthday, and we were in the Lake District, and I can't remember where we were staying, near Keswick. No, down. Anyway, one of the big lakes in the South Lake District, Windermere, and we come out of this bar, and as we come out, about 60 tractors went past, one after another, bombing down this back road. Was that the same people? Was you one of them?
Yeah, that's called a tractor run, and we do that. Isn't it surprising, Shelley, how all these old white men with grey beards end up in pubs?
Because riding a tractor makes you attractive.
You noticed? Yeah.
I don't know that running a tractor does make you attractive, Babasi, but I don't know. But I've never driven a tractor, so I don't know.
Neither have I.
I love all these stories where there's kings and they give storytellers gold. Yeah. But this happened. I mean, quite recently. I was talking to. This is by the by, because we're storytellers. I was talking to the ex-gardener of the Queen Mother, and apparently, she didn't watch television, but she loved stories. And there was a gypsy storyteller used to pass by, and he'd be invited in. and he'd tell her a story, and he'd be given a bed for the night, and next to his breakfast the next morning there'd be half a crown. So that's
I tell you what, John, the old Queen Mother, she may not have watched TV, but she watched the racing on the screen every bloody afternoon.
I bet she did. Right. Anyway, sorry. I've cut in because because Gary's about to announce our last story, isn't it?
I am, if that's okay. Maria Gillen, yes, it's thanks for joining us. Thanks for bringing your tale. The night is rolling on and people are disappearing. So we're going to call it an end. Thank you.
It's a brief one. It's less than 3 minutes.
No, I've got you. Yep. What I was going to say, I'm just going to thank all of the storytellers that came along this evening, shared their wonderful stories, and the wisdom that was packed into those stories, and the journeys that we went on have been absolutely wonderful. I wanted to thank Ali for making sure that everything worked so smoothly as he always does, and to Abdu for hosting the conversation with the Riyadh. Thank you very much. It's been a fabulous evening. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Sadly, we were missing the main storyteller of the evening, Dave. But you know, if we had it done, if Dave had been there, we'd still be another half hour of storytelling, which is not a problem, of course, at all, because we go on and on and on as storytellers do. So I'm just going to say the last story of this particular rock, the Kasbah, is coming from Baba C, who wanted to share a 3-minute tale with us. Are you all right, Ali, to do 3 more minutes? Thumbs up on that. Yeah, great. And then we'll let you go, because it must be, I don't know what time it is in Morocco at the moment, but later than
I'll do a quick announcement of what's coming up after this, but after Baba.
Yeah, absolutely, John.
30 seconds.
I wanted to share the story because it's a personal story of traveling. In the 70s, when I was in my 20s and being reintroduced to the art of storytelling, I had a great aunt that I was talking to her, and she was talking about monies that were available for the descendants of a storytelling group from Clifton Forge, which is my father's hometown, Clifton Forge, Virginia, a place so small that you're now entering and you're now leaving was on the same billboard. So this great aunt keeps telling me about this money, and because I'm the sole survivor of this group, that I'm entitled to the money. So back in those days, my thing was, if I could get someplace, I could always get back. So I got a one-way ticket on a bus to go from Washington, D.C. to Clifton Forge. But then I got instructions that I had to stop at another city, another small town just outside of Clifton Forge. So that's what I did. And I went to talk to a cousin. She looked at me and said, she needs to stop doing that. She keeps telling people this year after year after year. There is no money. Yes, there was a group, but there is no money. The group's been disbanded. There is no money. And she must have seen the look on my face. She says, look, I can put you up for the night. I'll feed you, put you up for the night, and I'll send you to Clifton Forge in the morning because I don't have enough money to send you back to DC. So that's what she did, and I ate well. And I get to Clifton Forge, and part of me wants to go confront this great aunt. And part of me says, wait, I need to be someplace else. So I'm walking down what we used to call the street. And we call it that because on the street was the big house, not that big house, but the big house where my family stayed when we visit Clifton Forge. Clifton Forge was so small, all you had to do is dial the last 4 digits of a telephone number and you got through. So I'm walking and something says, stop at this house and knock on the door. So I stopped at this particular house that I recognized I had stayed in as a child and in my teens. And I knock on the door, and this man opens the door and he looks at me, and his eyes get big like he's looking at a ghost. He said, no, you can't be, because I grew up with him. You can't be him. And I said, you know my father? And I said my father's name. He said, yes. I said, I'm his eldest son. I'm the second. He said, whoa. So they invited me in. I told him what happened. And he says, well, look, I was on leave and I'm going back to the military base in the morning. I'll give you a ride back. So I ate well, had a good breakfast, got in the vehicle with him, and he takes me back but I thought he was going to put me out just outside of DC, but no, he takes me close enough so I can walk to where I was staying at the time before he has to make a left and go to his military base. I share this story because it's a story of travel, a story of goodwill, a story of looking out, a story of taking care of each other. And my bag of gold was getting back to DC. Thank you.
Thank you, Baba C. Thank you, Gary, for hosting tonight. And if you want to see more of Baba C, he's on Friday at 6 o'clock telling stories for children. Before that, Tuesday at 5 o'clock, all in UK time, we have our Young International Tellers, which is the Tuesday nights gives me hope for the future because we have international tellers from all over the world. And of course, next Sunday, we have our worldwide story round with hosted by Mike Rust, the man pointing to himself down there. He's getting off his tractor and he's going to share a story or two, and to keep things in good order. Meanwhile, give us money, because that's what tonight's all about.
Money.
Actually, tonight was all about stories, but you know, the bonus is if we get some in the pot. And good night and thank you all. It's been a magnificent evening. And thank you, Ali and Abdul. It's great to have everyone here from the cafe, Mohammed, Ali, Abdul, that whole Marrakesh crew. So round of applause for them and good night.
Good night. Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, everyone. Good
Thank you, everybody. Good night. Good night to the world.
Thank you, everyone, especially for letting me tell that brief tale.
Bye.
Adios.
Adios. To be continued.
Good night. Thanks, Ali.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Baba.
Okay, bye-bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.